This gruesome infection in HBO's The Last of Us is actually based on this very real parasitic fungus that turns certain insects into zombies.
Growing from her head, that is the fruiting body that contains the spores.
The creators of the game and the new show were inspired by zombie carpenter ants specifically. They even gave the bugs a quick cameo.
So it's a pretty cool Easter egg that's in the game.
The zombies in The Last of Us go through 4 stages of infection which have parallels in nature. Wired spoke to an expert on the real fungus referenced in The Last of Us
Those are a lot of spores.
to compare those zombies with similar examples in nature. Most zombies in TV and film are depicted as reanimated corpses, but not in The Last of Us.
Viruses can make us ill, but fungi can alter our very minds.
One thing it does right, where a lot of movies do it wrong, is that the infected are still alive when they're manipulated. There's lots of examples of this in nature.
The brains of living crickets, cockroaches, and even mammals can get hijacked by different types of zombie parasites that alter their behavior. New research shows that gray wolves get infected with toxoplasma by interacting with cougars and their feces, which carry the parasite.
Those that are infected are more risk-taking, more bold, becoming the leader of the pack. The behaviors that we're seeing are rather complex.
And in the case of ants, the cordyceps parasite spreads throughout the body as a yeast, which secretes chemicals that behave similarly to neurotransmitters in the brain.
It looks like the fungus is avoiding the nervous tissue. It's not chewing on it, it's not eating it. These cells might be close to the brain and then secrete molecules that manipulate it in such a way that it behaves so precisely to help this fungus spread.
In the first stage, the infected humans don't show outward signs of their condition.
In the beginning, the ants don't behave differently. After a few days, you see that the behavior of the ants definitely is changing.
In the video game, it starts with a twitch.
Twitching, we also see this in our ants. They seem to have sometimes whole body convulsions. The fungus is producing a compound that is similar to aflatrim. Certain fungi produce this, and when an animal ingests this, they get Stagger's syndrome. So they get these tremors.
Then the humans in The Last of Us get a little hyper, moving at high speed as if stimulated by chemicals excreted by the fungus. A similar thing happens with the zombies in Professor de Bekker's lab.
They're out and about all times of the day, in constant locomotion.
Soon, The Last of Us runners lose the ability to speak. So do infected ants in a sense.
They don't communicate so well with other nestmates anymore. Ants will sniff each other out with their antennae. The smell of these ants definitely change. So if an ant starts to smell differently because she is sick, they basically will kill her and put her on a discard pile.
There might be a similar social immunity dynamic at play in The Last of Us.
I see a pile of humans infected by this fungus and sprouting mushroom bodies. Definitely a pile I wouldn't want to get near, you know?
Stage 2, the stalker phase of The Last of Us zombies, is characterized by obvious fungal growth.
The stalker definitely looks more cordyceps-like, so all those strings growing off of the head, they very much remind me of the stalks that we see on our ants, for instance. It looks like the first bit of a mushroom body coming off of the left side of her head. That looks pretty gnarly.
Similarly, in nature, the parasitic Masopora fungus radically transforms its host's physical shape and gives it a desire to seek out new hosts to infect.
This cicada, you'll see that it's missing a part. It's behind its genitals, aptly named the butt fungus because it loses its butt. That's a fungal plug, and the powder are the fungal spores. This is how the fungus is able to release its spores and infect other cicada. In the game and in the show, this fungus is able to reproduce by biting other humans or by contact with spores off of other humans that have these fruiting bodies sprouting off of them. Mesospora resembles the fungus in the game a little bit.
Because in The Last of Us and in nature, zombies have increased energy and they start to spread out and wander.
Normally, these ants would go forage for food with their nestmates and nicely follow ant trails. Instead, they actually just wander around aimlessly.
Could a similar wandering dynamic be at play with gray wolves infected with a protozoan parasite?
Wolves infected with toxoplasma are more likely to wander away from their former pack to find a new one and are more risk-taking, more bold.
The wolves studied recently in Yellowstone National Park could be drifting nearer to the source of their infection, cougars, because toxoplasma reproduces only in the stomach of felines. In The Last of Us, during the clicker phase, the fungus has really taken over.
In the clicker, the morphology's changed entirely, so it makes me think more of the fungus called chicken of the woods, which is an edible fungus.
At this point, the zombies rely on echolocation after losing their sight. In real life, zombie ants might also become impaired because they start randomly climbing towards light.
They will climb up a plant at certain light levels because they don't perceive light so well anymore and they're trying to search for it, or they're getting themselves off the ground. This is what we call summiting behavior, something that a lot of parasites have evolved to use as a strategy to transmit better. The fungus is making the ant find some sort of microclimate that helps the fungus to develop its mushroom that releases the spores. But if you're higher up in the air, then your spores can be more easily carried by the wind
and can land on or be eaten by a new host. Another example of infected hosts acting in the interest of their parasite are cockroaches that get stung by jewel wasp, which inject their victims with a kind of mind control venom, along with a brood of eggs.
This changes the behavior of the cockroach entirely. It doesn't want to fight anymore. It's this very docile creature that then follows the wasp back to its burrow. Hopefully gets eaten alive by this developing egg that eventually becomes a larva, and not a situation that is beneficial to this cockroach, but very beneficial to the offspring of the wasp.
Similarly, crickets infected by the Gordian worm are compelled to act self-destructively.
The worm needs to be in water to mate. So what this worm does is it makes these crickets jump into water. This cricket has no business being in the water, so basically they have committed suicide.
And now the worm can breed in its natural habitat, the water. A similar process happens with toxoplasma in mice, which breeds in the digestive system of cats.
Rodents that get infected with toxoplasmosis actually makes these rodents attracted to cat urine. It's making it more likely that this rodent will get eaten. Definitely behavior that is beneficial to toxoplasma, but absolutely not for the rodent.
In the Last of Us game, it takes years for the fungus to cover the skin completely and turn human into slow-moving bloater. But for zombie ants in real life, to succumb completely takes about 3 weeks. And the beginning of the end starts with a hypercontraction of the jaw muscles. Ants bite a branch, can't let go, and die as they're eaten by the fungus within.
When the ant is in place, the fungus quickly changes its strategy and starts to eat everything, including the brain, to produce a fruiting body. This is when the fungus will change from being a yeast to forming a mycelium. Everything inside is just mycelium bursting out of the host. So this is what we often call the stalk. You see that on that stalk there's this brown bulbous thing attached. That's the fruiting body, so that carries the spores. Those are all mushrooms, if you will. Those are all fruiting bodies. As the spore gets into the air and as the air moves, it can easily take it to different places. So this is why we think that the summiting behavior is actually helping the fungus to spread its spores. See this spore cloud? Those are a lot of spores. This one would be exuding spores like crazy. It looks, very similar to what we envision the spores would look like. They're microscopically small, so we can hardly see them, but people that recorded spores coming from mushrooms, that's kind of what it looks like.
According to a recent World Health Organization report, fungal infections are estimated to kill at least 1.6 million people yearly. Aspergillus fumigatus can even spread to the brain of the immunocompromised. Other fungal pathogens are even showing resistance in settings like hospitals. Should we be worried?
Most of the fungi that we know of, at least, they like to grow at lower temperatures than our body temperature. Our bodies are just not great hosts to infect because the temperature would be too high. However, climate change and the earth getting warmer, fungi need to adapt to be able to grow at higher temperatures as well. Their optimal temperature will become closer to our body temperature, making it more likely that in the future we'll have more fungal infections.
Yikes, but there is one reason why all of humanity isn't likely to be wiped out by a mutant zombie fungus apocalypse like in The Last of Us.
In the game and in the show, what you see is that humanity is on the brink of being extinct. There aren't that many humans left. That's actually not a very smart strategy. If you wipe out your host entirely, then eventually there's no hosts to infect, so you will stop to exist as well. There's so much more going on that we don't understand quite yet. We also interact with a lot of microbes and a lot of organisms that are beneficial to us. Our microbiome has influence on a lot of our physiology that leads to certain behaviors. So who would we be without our parasites? Who would we be without our microbes? I think it's a very interesting philosophical question.